Welcome everyone! You may know that Bobby Fischer holds one of the most impressive chess records of all time. He won 20 consecutive games in a row in top-level competitions. It started in the Palma de Mallorca Interzonal with 7 wins in a row. Then he played Mark Taimanov in a candidates match and won 6-0. Then in his next match he defeated Bent Larsen 6-0. And finally he won his first game against Petrosian in their candidates match. Now that is showing the chess world you're the very best. But all things must come to an end, and today's game is the second game against Petrosian from their 1971 match. And even though Fischer didn't win, do stick around because this too is a great game. Let's get started. Petrosian had white and opened with d4. Knight f6, c4, g6. Fischer was of course a great exponent of the King's Indian. However, after knight to c3, Fischer went for the Grünfeld defense. Also a very combative opening. Often white here takes on d5 and then gets his big pawn center after e4, knight takes and pawn takes, and black's plan is to counterattack white's pawns with moves like bishop g7, c5 and knight to c6. Petrosian, however, goes for this more quiet approach with bishop to f4, but I think that's more his style. Bishop g7, e3, then c5, already challenging white's center pawns. Now white shouldn't be greedy and obsess over winning a pawn like this. After bishop d7 and queen takes pawn, white spent a couple of moves to get that pawn, but the queen doesn't look good, the king is far from safety, and he also sacrificed the bishop pair. And soon black will just open up the position and it'll be trouble for white. So Petrosian didn't go for that, he instead took on c5. Queen to a5, threatening with knight to e4 and put pressure on the knight, therefore rook to c1. But after knight to e4, you would think the pressure on c3 is still a problem for white. In fact, it's fine. Petrosian simply took on d5 as well, because if knight takes c3, which was played by Fischer, then queen to d2, pinning the knight to the queen and getting his piece back that way. Fischer played the best move. He took on a2. Taking on c5 doesn't work out. Now white has a cool move, bishop to h6. And if black takes, then rook takes c3, and black even has to give up the queen, otherwise white takes the bishop on c8 and then the rook as well. Going back, queen takes a2 was played. Pawn takes knight. Fischer avoided the queen trade. Then bishop to c4. The bishop would be hit after queen takes c5, but then the bishop happily sits on a2. That's no problem. Knight to d7. Now knight takes c5 may also be played. Petrosian also brought his knight out, and apparently Fischer thought that was a mistake. He felt the knight belongs on f3 because it then also guards the e5 square, and that explains Fischer's next move, knight to e5. He wanted to prove that knight to e2 was a mistake. Maybe he'll follow up with bishop to f5 and target d3 as well. But things are not so simple, as we'll see. The bishop is attacked, so bishop a2. And now black should try queen takes c5 and go for counterplay with the passed a pawn. Fischer didn't do that. He wanted to go for this bishop to f5 plan, but he clearly underestimated Petrosian's next move. He traded his bishop for the knight. Most top players clearly prefer bishops, so maybe Fischer didn't really consider this move. After bishop takes, knight to d4 was also extra strong, because now knight takes f5 may be happening as well, not only taking the bishop pair away, but also damaging the pawn structure. Fischer found the best move. He simply took his pawn back. Black really has no good way to keep the light squared bishop. If bishop takes d4, then c takes d4, and after the queen trade, white just has these amazing pawns and he can follow up with f3 and e4. That's just awful for black. And if bishop to d7, then white's pawns are already charging up the board after f4, bishop g7 and c6. White can even play all these moves with tempo. After b takes and d takes c6, the pawns again keep coming. The bishop on a2 is also active now. Certainly that's also no fun at all for black. So therefore Fischer wisely accepts to have the bishop traded off. But after castles, Fischer got under more pressure after his next move, queen to a5. It looks logical, the queen still keeps an eye on the c and d pawns, it also keeps an eye on the bishop, the c pawn is now pinned, but he is in some trouble now. Now going briefly back here, maybe rook to d8 was a better move, simply targeting the d pawn. If then queen to d3 looking at the f pawn, queen to c8. And when the bishop also joins in, first go b6. White cannot take right away because the d pawn would be hanging. So let's say c4. And maybe black can just hang on by going for a kind of blockade with bishop to d6. Of course, it's a more passive way to play, but white's pawns are his major asset and it's a lot harder to use them now. Going back to the game after queen to a5, Petrosian had a simple but powerful move, queen to c2. So preparing to advance the c-pawn, but also looking at the f-pawn, Fischer made the most out of that weakness. He just ditched the pawn, but Petrosian wasn't distracted. c4, just going full steam ahead, and after f takes e3, Petrosian just ignored black's pawn and advanced again. Fischer is in massive trouble now. White's pawns may break through to the king is also still in the middle, and that bishop on a2 is like a sniper on the edge of the board. Fischer, desperate to trade queens, went queen to d2. Of course, Petrosian avoided that. King to f8. Rook from c to d1. Now the rook supports pawn to d6. Fischer was fighting hard. He played the best move, queen to e2. Going for e2 to win material like this isn't helping black. After black queens, d6 opens up the diagonal, queen to f4 maybe next, maybe d7, d8. It's just horrible for black. And you can't tell me that any of black's rooks is better than white's bishop. Therefore, queen to e2, but then d6. Fischer tried queen to h5, threatening with mate, but also forking the rooks with e2. But Petrosian already had it figured out. f4 stops mate, and e2 isn't good enough, and it also allowed one of the things Petrosian liked most, and that's sacrificing the exchange. He took the bishop, allowing pawn takes rook. Black also grabs a pawn, but it doesn't matter. Rook to f1 targeting f7, so f6. Queen to b3 threatening a mate. There's nothing Fischer can do anymore. He decided to run with the king, but then check. King to h6, pawn takes e7, now rook takes f6 check is the threat. f5 at least avoids the check, but after rook takes pawn, queen check, and king to h1, after 20 straight wins in a row, Fischer had to accept the streak was over and resigned. There's nothing he can do. If queen check, rook f1, and queen to h5, then rook f6 check either simply wins the queen, or black runs into a swift checkmate. Now when Fischer resigned, apparently Petrosian got a standing ovation from the crowd. He really did play a great game and finally someone managed to stop Bobby Fischer. Now it started going wrong for Fischer at this point after bishop to f5. He just didn't expect that Petrosian would trade the bishop for the knight, and after this continuation, the structure was also damaged, and as soon as they reached this point, it was already clear everything had gone horribly wrong for Fischer, but the chess world did get to enjoy a wonderful game. So, do let me know what you think of this game. I think Petrosian is an underrated player even as a world champion, so I'll definitely share more of his games. I'm sure you will enjoy them too. Check out the playlist for many more great games. I'll be seeing you guys again soon, and take care.